All right, so we're going to go through some information, and I know that Del Bigtree is on at 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to brush over this information. And if you TWD in the comments on Facebook alone, YouTube will not work the same. You cannot comment in YouTube and TWD and get automatically received links. The link to the website where you can get the research links, research articles. So something ironic to me came across my, as I was searching and looking at information on COVID-19 and looking at the appearance of the pathology of coronavirus or COVID-19. So I wanted to discuss that with you, show some information to you, and the reality is I do not believe that the majority of the cases right now due to coronavirus or COVID-19 are caused by vaccination and misdiagnosis. But it is going to happen, and it has been happening. And the biggest thing is that a large majority of people who are suffering from pneumonia with other viral infections are being classified as probable cases. If you look up, probable cases are now being accounted for or used in COVID-19 deaths as well as cases. So it skews the data. It distorts the reality of what's really going on and how serious this virus is. I just want to point that out to everybody, that the truth is not being given to us, and this is only a small portion of information that people would need to have at their fingertips and understanding so that they could understand the truth of the situation that's going on. So I will give you that, and let's go through it. So radiological findings from 81 patients. So this study was published here very, very recently, actually towards the beginning of the epidemic, and looking at 81 patients. And they said bilateral pneumonia was seen in 64 of them, peripheral in 42, ill-defined 66, ground glass opacities. They have said time and time again, even individual medical physicians have said bilateral pneumonia was unique to coronavirus. That's something they rarely saw in the past, which is not accurate. So that was kind of frustrating to hear medical physicians saying that on a Christian, a pastor's, Facebook page. So, but ground glass opacities, opacification. So if you look at that, that was one of the signatures, they'd call it. They were saying that that was one of the common findings in coronavirus. That was one of the signatures. So pay attention to that as we go forward with this. So, and lower lobe pneumonia was another substantial finding. So can vaccines cause coronavirus disease? And again, if they are using probable cases, which there are many cases of individuals at hospitals. In fact, I spoke with a nurse at Bach, and she in fact said that they did not have to put anybody on the ventilator with coronavirus detections, but other people with probable cases, they did. So the reality is, the statistics are being skewed. That's the main point I want to get across. The reality, the numbers we're being given and we're being told is not accurate. It is biased, and it's being inflated by other causes of pneumonia, and that is a fact. So acute respiratory failure, this is secondary to eosinophilic pneumonia. Eosinophilic pneumonia was seen in mice studies in prior SARS coronavirus vaccines. So when they would vaccinate the animals, I did videos on this in the past, they would vaccinate the animals and then challenge them with the virus. The vaccine itself, by itself, did not cause the eosinophilic infiltration into the lungs. It didn't cause the pneumonia, the vaccine itself, but once they challenged the mice with the vaccine strain of SARS coronavirus, guess what happened? Eosinophilic immune responses causing severe SARS. Okay, severe acute respiratory syndrome, causing pneumonia, all right? So the vaccine primes you to have a greater risk in the future when you come in contact with the strain or possibly other coronavirus strains. So that being said, just a forewarning to anybody who's thinking they would like to get the coronavirus vaccine when it's fast-tracked into humans. So acute respiratory failure, eosinophilic pneumonia following influenza vaccination in elderly men and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Just reading you straight from the research study and case report. We report here in a patient with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease who developed severe fever with worsening of respiratory symptoms and severe hypoxemia, requiring ventilation or ventilator, support shortly after influenza vaccination. And guess what? Ground glass opacities were found on CT scans. Again, a central finding, a key finding in supposed coronavirus illness. So if that happened today, then guess what? He would be a probable case. That man would have been a probable case. These are past findings, not current findings. These are past research studies and case studies on individuals succumbing to pneumonia due to vaccinations. So if it happened today, that individual, that man, would be called a probable coronavirus case. Going on, interstitial lung disease associated with HPV vaccination. This individual, this 40-year-old, the woman was in her 40s and she received 3 inoculations of Severity. So that was an HPV vaccine. 3 months later, she presented with a cough, shortness of breath, findings of the compared tomography of the chest, and tracheobronchial lung biopsy were consistent with nonspecific interstitial pneumonia. Workup eliminated all other causes of this condition, except for the vaccine. High-resolution computed tomography, chest revealed peribronchial consolidation, subpleural reticular shadows, and ground glass opacities. So again, if this happened today, this would be a probable coronavirus case. So going on with another one, interstitial pneumonitis caused by seasonal influenza vaccine. And the 74-year-old man who received seasonal influenza vaccination, clinic developed a fever, cough following the very following morning after the vaccine. He was referred to our hospital on the 5th day after vaccination because of bilateral pulmonary infiltration, shadows of chest x-ray. So pneumonia. Acute exacerbation of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis because of the influenza vaccine. Chest computed tomography showed diffuse bilateral ground glass opacities. Again, these individuals would be considered coronavirus deaths or coronavirus cases, and ventilator cases, severe cases, if they happen today because of a vaccine. Interstitial pneumonia associated with influenza. This is a case report of 2 different cases. So there you have 2 more cases of pneumonia because of vaccination. Seasonal influenza vaccine-induced pneumonitis presenting with multiple pulmonary nodules. This is actually a 39-year-old woman who received seasonal influenza vaccine November 15th, subsequently experienced malaise, low-grade fever, chest discomfort. Chest x-rays performed 2 weeks after vaccination showed multiple nodules, shadows in the lungs, and ground glass shadows in both lower fields. Again, a highlight finding of supposed coronavirus. So not only that, not only will vaccines be a vaccine injury be misdiagnosed as coronavirus these days, but also if you look into other viral infections that cause the exact same condition. So let's go with this. Rhinovirus associated with severe respiratory failure in immunocompetent patients. So this individual typically, they say that rhinovirus infections which typically they don't cause severe illness. Coronavirus were said to very rarely cause severe illness, but as you'll see some of these numbers, you'll find that they actually made up a substantial number of the people every year in the past dying of pneumonia or contracting community-acquired pneumonia. So rhinovirus infection is typically associated with common cold, has rarely been reported as a cause of severe pneumonia in immunocompetent individuals or adults. 55-year-old healthy woman who consumed a half a bottle of alcohol daily, she succumbed to bilateral diffuse ground glass opacity found on chest radiographs because of rhinovirus. So rhinovirus, which makes up 50% in the majority of cases of influenza-like illness, the common cold during the summer. So while we're in the summer right now, the majority of the cases are actually rhinovirus, but because they're using probable cases, and rhinovirus can cause, in both immunocompetent, you wouldn't. If you're immunocompetent, you're not succumbing to pneumonia because of a virus. It's immunoincompetent that you would succumb to a virus. So because they had no prior evaluation of this woman's health, no testing on her immunocompetency, they can't call this woman, that prior woman there, in this case, they couldn't say that she was immunocompetent. So, viral pneumonia. Again, that rhinovirus case would be called a probable case of COVID today. Viral pneumonia. All right, let's look. So this study was published in 2011 in the Lancet. Guess what? Here are some cases. In adults, viruses are putative, causative agents in a third of the cases of community-acquired pneumonia, in particular influenza, rhinoviruses, and coronaviruses. So in 2011, they knew that up to 1/3 of total pneumonia cases were caused by primarily 3 different viruses: influenza, rhinoviruses, and coronaviruses. Yet in the past, they never differentiated between those 3 viruses. They never cared to test everybody for coronavirus. They never cared to test everybody for rhinovirus. They just blamed all pneumonia cases on the flu. They used that to push their pneumonia or their flu vaccines to prevent pneumonia. They didn't care. Now they do, because they're trying to fast track a vaccine, in my opinion. So, +1, 2019, pneumonia severity index and viral community. Wow, right before a epidemic, a coronavirus, they give us information to show us that out of the 254 cases of one single virus detected in these community-acquired pneumonia cases, 62 were influenza, 18 were influenza B, 62 were influenza A, 18 were influenza B, 65 were rhinovirus. Roughly 50% were rhinovirus. But they're not testing for rhinoviruses right now to say this person doesn't have ground glass opacities, dual lower lobe pneumonia because of rhinovirus. No, they just say it's a probable case of COVID. That's all they do. It's biased. In my opinion, it's lies. All right, 35 were respiratory syncytial RSV, 25 were metapneumonia virus, 20 were parainfluenza virus, 17 were coronaviruses, 7 were Boca virus, 5 were adenovirus. They are not differentiating between pneumonia cases of all these other viruses and coronaviruses now. Respiratory disease. You want to know why pneumonia cases and infectious illness cases or pneumonia activated by infectious disease, initiated by infective disease is happening is because our nation is succumbing to an epidemic of chronic illness. Folks, if you have an increasing year after year number of people suffering with chronic respiratory disease, you're going to see an increased number of people dying from infections. But yet they're not actually dying from infections. Infections are the straw that breaks the camel's back sometimes. But it is the underlying immunological status and health status of that individual that makes them susceptible to severe illness because they came in contact with and contracted an infectious illness. So because our nation has soaring rates, increasing rates of chronic respiratory diseases, chronic problems, that's why we're seeing increases. Trends and patterns of differences in chronic respiratory diseases mortality among U.S. counties, 1980 to 2014. Again, rates are skyrocketing in the U.S. and have been. But it seems our health establishment, our medical establishment doesn't care. They've been ignoring this that's killing thousands of people and is a huge risk factor. This group of individuals with chronic respiratory illnesses, chronic diseases, are the ones who are most susceptible to this coronavirus. All coronaviruses, metapneumonia, parainfluenza, influenza A, B, C, D, I don't care. They're susceptible to all of those. Yet our medical establishment and scientific community isn't doing all they can. And guess what? As rates of vaccinations have increased in America, so has the rate of chronic respiratory illnesses and pneumonia rates. So as we vaccinate more, we see more people dying from respiratory infections and developing chronic respiratory diseases. Yet we are vaccinating more people than ever before against supposed respiratory illnesses. What we are doing isn't working. What the medical and scientific community is doing right now is allowing our nation and the world to get sicker and sicker. If they truly cared about the lives of people and not profits, they would have been figuring this out back in at least 2014 when this paper was published. You could say some are, and I agree. Some scientific researchers, some medical physicians are trying to get the word out against vaccinations and their risk, eosinophilic diseases, against chronic respiratory diseases, against increased inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. There are medical physicians and scientists out there trying to get the word about the increased exposure to chemicals we're using to sanitize our environment to supposedly protect us against infectious diseases, yet those chemicals we use increase our risk of chronic illness. So there are some good ones out there, and I thank God for those individuals. But folks, what we're being led to believe right now in this world is not the truth, all right? Are there people who are sick, suffering, succumbing to infectious illnesses, dying in pneumonia in hospitals today? Yes, there are. But there would be far less if we focused on how to restore their ability to fight off an infection or restore their ability or prevented them, restore their ability to heal, to be healthy, corrected underlying causes of these chronic respiratory illnesses. Or what if we started preventing these chronic health conditions in the first place by stop doing what we're doing that is making society sicker. All right? So as you can see, I'm kind of worked up. I'm tired of listening to the lies right now. Tired of them using the deaths, the untimely, the sad deaths of anyone they possibly can, probable cases of COVID-19 for their agenda. Unacceptable in my opinion. Folks, use this information, use these research studies to help other people see the truth. All right, I'm the Wild Doc, Dr. Dale. I hope this information blesses you. I hope you use it to open the eyes, ears, and help people see that right now we don't need to live in fear. They want these numbers to look horrible so they can continue to gain power, control, and profits. That's what I see going on. Love you all, appreciate you all, share the truth. Don't just like it's the only way we save lives.